All right, so fall maintenance on Can-Am Defender. I need to change the engine oil, oil filter, gearbox oil, which is also the transmission, so the rear differential and the gearbox and the transmission are all the same oil underneath. I've got written down I want to do the front differential too. It's not much fluid, maybe 15, 20 ounces. I think I got to double check my specs, but check the air filter and do whatever other maintenance is required. I've got the owner's manual, and then I've also purchased the repair manual. So I've done the oil filter. I've done this before, so it's not that hard. The hardest part is the oil filter's kind of down in there. It's just not easy access. That's the hardest part about this whole project. All right, so I'm going to start with the oil filter and oil. I just had it running for a while, so it's warmed up, ready to drain. I am going to jack it off the ground because I am not going to be able to crawl underneath there in the current state. Before I get into this, I'm going to take the vacuum and just vacuum down in there. The oil filter is down back over behind over there, that corner over there. Hard to see without the lights. This oil-filled dipstick. So, and this is the transmission gearbox fill right here. So I'm going to get down there with the shop vac and get as much of the leaves and sticks out as much as possible, because it does get pretty dirty when I'm draining on that steel pan underneath the engine. Here's the spark plugs. Yeah, so I'm going to get the shop vac out and get some cleaning done.
Running for you.
It's a big stick. All right, let's see if I can find the drain. There it is right there. So this is the engine oil drain. And then I believe the transmission is further back. So the engine oil, per my notes, takes a 17 millimeter socket. Per the owner's manual, they want you to change there's a little aluminum O-ring, not even O-ring, washer. Supposed to change that every time. So I ordered some from Napa. There it drops. I should have got a rag towel. You want to get one for me? So yeah, as I was saying, this is the little washer that goes on the drain plug. Here's a drain plug. I'm not sure how well you can see that, but Can-Am Bombardier, or however you pronounce it, wants you to change that drain plug washer at every oil change. So these are the gaskets I bought from Napa 704-1390. Of course, made in China. Got 5 of them. So I'm good for the next 5 oil changes. Actually, you need 2 of them. One for the oil drain plug and one for the rear end. Now these are a little bit thicker than the OEMs. Pretty sure that the OEMs come in at about 1 millimeter thick. You can see the difference. But they're going to accomplish the same goal. They're not too thick for the threads. We'll be able to get a good seal. All right, while I have the oil drain plug dripping, I'm going to change the oil filter. It's right back here. There's a cover on the engine. Probably hard to see on camera, but there's 3 bolts holding it on there. The multi-option as far as what you want to use for a tool. My notes say you can use a T30 wrench or an 8 millimeter socket. So I'm choosing to go with 8 millimeter, 3 bolts. Broke them loose. Most likely there's going to be a little bit of oil spillage, so I put a towel underneath to try and minimize any oil spillage. Pull the cover off. And a little bit of oil. And then the oil filter. So this is the drain the cover. There's an O-ring on there, and they want you to replace that O-ring every time. Pull it out. It's the part number 420230920. I just order on the internet. Wrap it around the outside. This end goes in. I'm just gonna put a little bit of oil on everything so that it slides on there nicely. We'll insert the oil filter into the housing, get it in there, and then we'll put the housing back on, or the cover back on. Start working the screws back in. There is a spec per the owner's manual for these cover screws, 89 pound-inches. I'm not going to use a torque wrench. I'm just going to go by feel. But if you want to use torque wrench, 89 plus or minus 9 pound-inches. Your O-ring that you just replaced is what's doing the sealing. And now this is where that spray brake clean comes in handy in bulk, because you probably can't see it, but there is a mess underneath where that oil filter housing was. So I'm just going to spray a bunch of brake cleaner down there. I got my drain pan underneath. Get everything cleaned up nicely so there isn't any residual oil left. It's probably best, if I were to do this again, just to put one big rag all the way underneath here. Catch all the oil you can. Because if you put a big enough rag as far underneath this oil filter housing as you can, that'll catch all that oil that comes out of the oil filter. Now I've got a little mess. Well, you live and learn. That's why I'm doing these videos, so then I can remember what I suggest to myself next time. And you learn too. All right, so I torqued the drain plug. That goes to 22 foot-pounds. I did use a torque wrench on that one, because you want to make sure that aluminum compresses enough to make that nice seal. So I followed the torque specs, 22 foot-pounds. It's in the owner's manual. So now I'm going to put in oil. I'm using the XPS 0W40 this time around. Actually, the last oil change, what I just drained out of there was AMSOIL 0W40. This time I'm doing XPS because it's what I had a quart on hand, ordered 2 more quarts, or I had 2 quarts on hand, ordered another quart to have enough. Next time I'll go back to AMSOIL. So the capacity calls for 2.1 quarts. In my notes in the past, I've only done 2 quarts, 2 ounces. So it's probably best practice to put in 2 quarts, then top it off. To check the oil, unscrew it, We'll wipe it clean, put it back in, screw it in completely, pull it back out. Looks like we're right just below the max. Perfect. Right where we want to be. All right, so next step. Now we got the engine oil done. We'll drain the transaxle, rear transaxle fluid, and then fill it in right here. To drain the gearbox oil, I'm first gonna remove the plug, the fill plug, so that it provides for airflow. So just like the engine oil, 17 millimeter for the gearbox. And I did not bring a rag with me. I'm gonna get that first before I go any further. Now that oil's cool. So as I mentioned, the owner's manual wants you to change it every 2 years. Definitely not put the miles on. So years it is. Before we install the drain plug, oh, I did see, here's the washer. So make sure the washer comes out. The old washer. It didn't come out with the drain plug, but it did fall out. Very little fines on the magnet, so that's good. So we'll put the new washer on it. Reinsert it up inside. Got my torque wrench set to 22 foot-pounds, which is what the spec is. Just like that. Simple enough. The specs for gear oil calls for 50.6 ounces. So here's a quart. I'm using the XPS synthetic gear oil 75W140. That's what the rear transaxle, whatever you want to call it, gearbox, they call it in the manual. The rear gearbox, 75W140. To check the oil after you fill it, install the dipstick, screw it down, pull it back out, and it's got to be between these two notches. And we're 3/4 of the way there, so we're good. That's the operating range, min-max. So I'm checking the air filter. Actually looks pretty nice. Not bad at all. Clean. I'm not even gonna blow it out. Can't even really see any dust in there. Put that back in there. I don't do much trail riding, so it's not getting dusty, that's for sure. The front differential requires a 5 millimeter hex. I don't even know what you call these. It's like an Allen wrench. It goes right up inside here. Pretty simple to access. Get a drain pan underneath it. That's all it is. A little O-ring on there. All right, so I got a swivel extension on there. Oh, tighten that last. I did. So that I could get a good grip on that 8 millimeter head. I'm already ready to reinstall the drain plug because this is pretty much done draining. Make sure I get it up in there nicely. The drain plug is spec'd at 24 inch pounds. So I'm just going to choke down on it a little bit. That's probably close enough to 24 inch-pounds that we'll ever need. And then the filler is 146 inch-pounds, but we need to fill it up with fluid first. Specs call for 14 ounces of 75 W90 synthetic gear oil. I'm using XPS stuff again. So I'm just going to dump that in here. I got my funnel inserted into the orifice. I already measured out this 14 ounces. Just making sure I'm not leaking any. Oh, I spilled a little. All right, and then we'll put the filler plug back in, utilizing our swivel. All right, it called for what, 140 some inch-pounds, so it's pretty big plugs. I'll just go till it feels good. And this is where the brake clean comes in handy. I know I spilled a bunch out here, spilled some underneath the drain plug. Just get all that oil off of there. All right, so that concludes, I think, the big ticket items. The last thing I'm going to do now is going to go around with the grease gun and get all the suspension grease fittings. The front ones, you need to put it on the ground and then jack up the front end so that the A-arms rotate down. The Zerks are on top and you can't get a grease gun in there without letting it rotate down. So it's best to, for at least the front, to do that. The bottom ones you can get access to, is the top ones that are pretty tough to get in there. I'm sure it's probably possible if you had a right angle grease gun, but I don't. And the other thing that it calls for, every 2 years they want you to replace the brake fluid. Now, if you're a Harley owner, that's really, really important. Brake fluid can accumulate moisture as it sits. This thing typically does not go into a lot of hot and cold, so there's not a lot of moisture accumulating, but I will look into replacing the brake fluid here in the near future. Maybe I'll do another video on that, just doing the brake fluid. But I'm not going to do it right now. I wanted to get the oil, the gear oil, and the gearbox oil, and the front differential oil done, and the brake fluid I'll do later. And I need to get some different spark plugs too, so maybe I'll do a second video on that. But that's a different topic. So yeah, what we did is we changed the engine oil filter and oil. We changed the gearbox oil. We changed the front differential fluid and oil, and that's it. That's all that's really required in this service. I'm sure there's a bunch of other stuff as far as just checking things over. I'll read the owner's manual, double check, but the big ticket items are finished. So yeah, that's that. So do you guys do this yourself? Let me know in the comments. Do you ever take it to the dealer? One thing I do notice is that when you start the rig up, it says maintenance required on it. I'm not sure how to get rid of that. I think you actually need their software or interface, whatever, to do that. And I'm not gonna do that. Maybe I'll look into buying the software, because I don't really typically take these things to the dealer to do things. I do a lot of it myself, as you can see. Trying to solve on this 2019 Can-Am Defender, when it first starts, it says high maintenance required. So if my understanding is correct based on the internet search, that you can reset that maintenance reminder. So I'm going to try and do that now. Never done this before, so we'll see how that goes. All right, so we'll shut it off. Make sure our selector is in park. And then I'm going to let the unit reset here, because you can kind of hear like the gauges make noises for, let's say, 30 seconds after you shut it off. So the process here is I'm going to turn the ignition switch on, do not start the machine, set the cluster to display the odometer, and then we're going to press the set button, the S here, and hold it pressed. And then I should probably find a spot to mount this GoPro. I'm going to go get a different thing here. Hold the S button and then flip the high beam on off 3 times, and then turn the ignition switch off while those last 2 steps while holding the S button. The last 2 steps of the high beam and the ignition switch have to be done within 5 seconds of pressing the S button. There it was. I just did it. All right. So, a couple of things, what I just did there. Held the S button, but cycle, as you saw, was pretty quick. Boop, 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 boop. Real fast. And then I held, turn ignition off, but I held the S button until the multi-cluster depowered. So when you shut it off, not sure if you can hear it or not. After you shut the ignition off, it whines for a while, maybe 10, 20 seconds. But then you can kind of hear a little click, and the screen LCD kind of flashes a touch. Right there. It clicked a little bit. You probably didn't hear it, but it clicked. And then, so I held the S button all the way through that click, and then when I turned it back on, the maintenance required was gone. Otherwise, that's it. Hit the like button, subscribe, and leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the Can-Am Defenders. So far, so good for us. We really enjoy it. Thanks for watching. Bye.